Welcome back. You're watching and listening to the Keypoints live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, online at 3news.com, and also on Facebook at TV3 Ghana. So we're moving on next to look at the conversation about presidential jets. And this week, the Defense Minister, Honorable Dominic Nutuwo, was in Parliament to answer a question that had been tabled by the MP for North Tongu, Honorable Samuel Kujetu-Abrakwa, regarding the chartering of a presidential jet for the president during his recent working visit to France. The defense minister gave a number of responses, and there have been subsequent discussions about that. We shall be interrogating all of that on the show from this point on. He alleges that Honorable Sam Okujetu-Ablakwa, that the cost of the chartering of a presidential jet came to some 2.8 million cedis plus, and questions are being asked about the state of Ghana's presidential jet, which is the Falcon, and why wasn't that used? Now in the studio to have that conversation with me, we have, from my extreme left, I have Mr. Richard Ahiagba. He's the former executive director of the Dankwa Institute, and next to me is Mr. Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, former Deputy Minister of Information. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
It's good to have you. We're happy to have you here. We're expecting to be joined by another panelist when he comes through. We will do the needful and introduce him accordingly. But before we go into the conversation here in studio, let's take a listen to some sound bites from the Honorable Samuel Kujetu-Ablakwa, and then we'll also take a sound bite from the Minister for Defense, Honorable Dominic Nutuwo. So let's take a listen to these.
And looking at the order paper for today, the question that was advertised for the minister responsible for finance on the cost of the president's recent travels to France, Belgium, and South Africa is conspicuously missing from today's order paper. And Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering what is the cause of this rather strange development. That's why I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member, your question is not before me anyway. Anyway, leadership, you...
Well, Speaker, for what I know, it's a speaker who admits question, and then when the questions are admitted and answers are ready, they are accordingly advertised. So I could make a reasonable deduction, and it's a fair deduction to make. Now, probably the answers are not ready, that is why it is not captured. So the honourable member may want to find out from the Speaker's office why the question was not advertised. That should be.
Yes, minority leadership. Mr. Speaker, the business committee met this morning. Sincerely, I couldn't take part in the meeting. I understand that the matter was discussed, and the minister has asked for a rescheduling of the question. So the question, I would engage my colleague. As I said, indeed, the Honorable Dr. Senator tried to reach me when she meeting, but I was held up in another discussion. So the Honorable Ablakwa, I'll persuade you that the question will be rescheduled and the Minister of Finance will come and respond to it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The simple answer I would have given to the question asked by the Honorable Member would have been a simple yes. The Falcon EX is with registration number 9G-EXE is serviceable. But as members will now appreciate from my explanation earlier, the decision to travel particularly to long and multiple destinations, such as the President traveling to France, Belgium, South Africa, and back to Ghana, especially during this COVID time, would always require a larger capacity aircraft such as a BBJ or an aircraft ACJ 319U, even when the Falcon is airworthy. If you wanted to travel, for example, from Europe to South Africa, he has to do a technical stop. And it is not desirable. When a president, as again said, when a president is traveling with more than 20 people for a business trip, as this president has done, and brought in more than 75 million for this nation, he will need more than just a Falcon. Otherwise, the people would have to go a day ahead of the president to prepare themselves. The president, in fact, has to go a day ahead because no president can shower in this aircraft. You cannot freshen up in this aircraft. So you cannot move from this aircraft straight into a meeting. If you are using a commercial plane, Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing. If you are going and you stop by Emirates, the Dubai government will have to give you courtesies. When you are going to the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom government will have to give you courtesies that are not necessary. That is the reason why the Togo government, the Togo president, Mr. Speaker, in the last ECOWAS meeting for 30 minutes, he chartered the same aircraft that our president chartered to France. He chartered the same aircraft. So, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right. So those were scenes from Parliament this week. The person speaking last there, obviously, being the Honourable Minister for Defence, Honourable Dominic Nitiwul there. Let me announce quickly that we've been joined by Dr. Lord Mensah. He's a senior lecturer at the Finance Department of the University of Ghana Business School. Good morning, Doctor. It's good to have you.
Yeah, good morning, and good morning to our viewers.
Right, good. So we're looking at this issue about presidential jets here. Let me start with you, Ms. Ahiangwa. Briefly, just so you know, we understand, how has the president been traveling since air travels, obviously, since he became president in 2017?
Well, good morning to my co-panelists yourself. It's been a while. Well, I think it's a combination of, commercial flights and with the Falcon state jets, and on this occasion, the rented airplane.
Will this be the first time he's rented?
I'll have to hazard a guess that perhaps this is the first time, but particularly this one, I'm thinking. Phyllis is shaking his head, maybe he has a different information. But as far as I know, this will be the first time.
Right, so he's been using the Falcon, like you say.
I mean, he's used it, and we know there was an instance where they had some scare, and so yes, he's used a combination of means to transport to travel. And
so why the decision to? I mean, we had the Minister for Defense talk about a number of things that, he couldn't. It's not one that would allow him to freshen up and all of that. Issue about space and all have come up. But then the argument, for instance, is that, well, the Falcon, I believe, is a 15-seater or 16?
The Falcon, yeah, with crew is 15. I think, yeah.
And the argument then is that if this jet that was chartered at such, an exorbitant amount seats 19, that means a difference of about 3. Then would the need or that argument about capacity, would that hold? Would that be tenable?
Yeah, so that is one way to look at it, but I wouldn't look at it from the capacity, exclusively from a capacity standpoint. I look at it from the safety standpoint, which I believe is the predominant consideration that anyone should make in terms of transporting the president of the country. And so,
but was that the predominant consideration, listening to the defense minister? Did that come through?
Yeah, that came through.
That was the prominent.
Yes, I think when you look at his written statement, he made allusions to that the safety of the crew and the passengers on board was a primary consideration. But then he said other things also. But then we need to apply emphasis where the emphasis is due. And I think that the safety of the President of the Republic, I think, is paramount to me, and it's worth spending to ensure that we keep him safe, to be able to arrive at his destination to do what business he must do for the benefit of Ghana.
Quickly, if I move to Felix, speaking about the safety issue, we heard the defense minister there talk about the fact that it's in a good state, it's airworthy.
Absolutely.
Sorry?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
You know,
So that, again, that safety argument, do you still stand by that? If that indeed is a predominant consideration we should be making as a people. Not you.
Okay,
still on Mr. Himba, just as the last.
Oh, yes. You see, so what is our consideration if I am going to fly? Okay. And I have an option between an airline that has a checkered history and then one that can guarantee, based on review, can guarantee my safety to go to where I'm going to. And if I am one making a decision for my child or for my family member, I would want to pay a bit more to make sure that I have that peace of mind to transport my family member. And as a country, we have a responsibility. The president is not the president of one group of people, he's the president of this country. And if this country is invested in that president, then we must make the right decisions to ensure his safety. Now, other arguments may arise about this, you can use this, it is this, is that, which I know Phyllis is going to make, but I'm saying that what is overriding is that we ensure that our president travel in safety and with all the people who are traveling with him, because in the end, we as a country have invested huge sums of money to elect him.
Right.
Okay? And maybe we should introduce that into the conversation, how much money we spend to elect our president, only to want to say that we cannot guarantee his safety. So for me, let's not, quibble and play politics with it. Yes, we must be prudent. Yes, we must ensure that we're getting value for money. Those are considerations we'll have. But before that, we must have a conversation about safety, and that for me is overriding.
Right. So we are understanding around the table, and I believe the majority of Ghanaians obviously believe that, yes, key thing to look out for is safety. And for me, I think for a country like Ghana, with the kind of economy we have, we can't have any other consideration. You're looking at safety. And so that is against the backdrop of, this whole conversation. And that's why people are asking questions. If the Falcon, as we've heard it to be, is in good condition, it can send, the president and his entourage back and forth to wherever they want to go, then why spend this amount of money? And by the way, this figure has not been disputed I haven't heard any denials about the amount involved. So then the presumption is that it is the actual figure. And so we can quote it and, carry on with the conversation with that. Then why do we, engage in that kind of expenditure? And the minority obviously has raised issues about this in Parliament. Felix, let's hear from you.
Yes. Now, good morning to you and our cherished viewers. Good morning to my colleague, Alex. First of all, there is absolutely no safety concern with the Falcon. And in fact, it is important in this discussion to refer to the statements of the defense minister, because that represents the official position of the government on the matter. The minister did not make any allusion to safety concerns. Indeed, he was emphatic that the Falcon is in good condition, it is serviceable. Indeed, he attempted to justify why, despite the good condition of the Falcon, the president opted for this Acropolis jet, that is ACJ Neo. Now, the minister gave two explanations. His first claim was that the Falcon did not have sufficient reach. In other words, it cannot travel long distances. And so it made its use a bit awkward on this particular occasion. The second explanation he offered was that the Falcon essentially is too small and that it cannot seat a certain number of people, and therefore it made using it inappropriate at this time. Now, we contend that both explanations are not satisfactory because they fly in the face of the facts that are available. Now, it is important to stress that this Falcon that we are talking about is not some medieval contraption. It's not a rickety vehicle. It is a fairly new aircraft. It was purchased in 2010. It was built to specification given by the Ghana Air Force, which controls the presidential aircraft. So it was delivered in 2010. It is regrettable that you don't have pictures of the inside of the Falcon. I have had the privilege to travel with the president on the Falcon before. So I can tell you that it is in pristine condition. In addition to the fact that it is fairly new, it has actually undergone refurbishment as recently as 2018. So it is looking much better than it was even initially delivered. There are no safety concerns. Again, the claim about reach cannot be true. If you go to the website,
but how far can you go? Just
yes,
for
I'm going to.
fans,
Yeah, if you go to the website of the manufacturer, that's all. They indicate that the aircraft has a maximum reach of 5,000 miles, which is in excess of 8,300 kilometers.
Into hours, that's
Hours, that is 9.5 hours non-stop. Now, the distance from Accra to Paris, which I'm sure many of us have been to, is 6.5 hours. In fact, it is 6 hours, 35 minutes. The total distance is under 5,000 kilometers. So, in fact, this Falcon can travel twice the distance between Accra and Paris non-stop. Now, the distance from Paris to Belgium, where the president also went to, is less than an hour. Now, the other leg of the travel was from moving from France or Paris to Johannesburg. All that is required was for the president to move from Paris to Accra, stop for an hour or two, freshen up. He could even go home or to the office, hold a meeting and still hop onto the aircraft and go to Johannesburg and then come back. And we'll be sorted. So the argument about reach simply cannot hold, because the aircraft we have has capacity to do that. Indeed, I have gone to France in that aircraft to the president before. That aircraft has gone to New York, which is about 10 hours from Accra, before. And it has gone to Asian countries, it has gone to, it has made transoceanic, transatlantic flights several times. So there is absolutely no dispute that this aircraft could have gone to France and back, or anywhere that the president wanted to go. The second issue about numbers in terms of capacity of the jet, and you raised it earlier. This aircraft, the Falcon we have, can seat 15 people. That is 4 crew members and 11 people. It has been configured so that it can seat 11 passengers with a crew of 4. Now, the Acropolis jet that we went for seats 17 people. At night...
Also, it's actually 17,
17 at night. When they call it the sleeper load, it has to be 17 people at night, because you have to account for the weight and everything. Now, so the difference is 6. We know that on this particular trip, not every member of the delegation sat in the aircraft that was rented. Other members, like the media and other ministers of state, went by commercial flights. So they didn't meet the capacity requirements with this jet in any event. The difference is just 6, as you said. So 6 people cannot justify the reason why we have to incur this expenditure in order to be able to meet the traveling requirements of the president. So there's absolutely no justification whatsoever in terms of reach or range or capacity to rent this aircraft when we have the Falcon available. If the Falcon was not available, for any reason it had broken down, then there will be justification to rent. But even if it was not available and we are going to rent, given all the circumstances of our country, given the difficulties we have, indeed, and I'm glad Dr. is here, he follows the economy closely.
The economic twist.
He will be the first to admit that our economy is in serious trouble. Indeed, only this week, the government statistician put out information that government's expenditure in terms of interest payments and salary payments alone resulted in a situation where we had to borrow in excess of 3 billion Ghana cedis to meet. So we don't even have the money to meet basic commitments like interest payments and salary payments, which is so mundane that every government should be able to do. We don't have that luxury now. So we cannot, in these circumstances, be renting aircraft of this nature. So even if there was a need for an aircraft to be rented, and we have proven that there was no need for it.
And this is not an aircraft of this.
We should have gone for. Indeed, it's not the first time we've rented an aircraft. But you rent a modest aircraft, something along the lines of the Falcon, so that we all know that you are feeling the pinch that people feel when you ask them. Government has imposed taxes. Fuel prices have gone up.
We'll come back to that.
We have all been lamenting. So
let me go to.
Yeah. So that's a final point before the defense minister also sought to introduce a new angle to the debate by slapping in the proposal basically for us to purchase a new aircraft.
We'll go into that.
Yes.
As a way of the way forward. How do we deal with this situation? So please hold on.
Okay, all right.
Hold on to that bit for us, and let me have Dr. Lord Mensa's initial take to this issue. A developing country like ours, we are having issues. We don't have we have a deficit budget we're running all the time, and you hear of 2.8 million Ghana cedis being used for this, raising issues about how effective we're, managing the public purse and all of that. Concerns are being raised by the ordinary Ghanaian. How do you see it? Let us understand from your perspective as an economist how much of an issue this is.
Good morning once again to my panelist members. Yes, clearly I understand the dynamics of our politics and then also the dynamics of our economy as well. And then looking at how our culture is feeding into, our political structures. Now, if you look at, the way we decorate our royals, so maybe Otumfo or Chihine, you can name them. The decoration we give them seem to be feeding into our, political space. At the end, we want to, when we are moving, we want to carry more people behind us to show that we are powerful, And so that notion of decorating our presidency has always been there. And that is even building up, if you look at our parliament, the way we've decorated the place and all those. It gives you the signal that, our culture is really feeding into, our politics. Now, clearly, if you ask me about the economic dynamics of this decision of spending 2.8 million Ghana cedis to hire a jet, for which we have a jet that is sitting on the tarmac, calling for maintenance cost, calling for, you can name them. In the end, you ask your question, you ask yourself whether in the president's inaugural speech, which he indicated that he will protect the public purse by ensuring value for money in all decisions as far as this country is concerned. And I was happy when, the first one of the ministries that came up was Ministry for Monitoring and Evaluation, which is one of the ministries to ensure, gives the signal that, there's always value for money as far as decision making is concerned. Now let's look at renting. Now, do you know there are dubious means or reasons why, sometimes in public sector, we rent. Let me give you a typical example. When you take those days, we used to have at the GFA, a coach, foreign coach, which we used to house them at in a hotel and paying regular, hotel fees. Now, what prevents us from getting, a building which will have all the specifications, which for me, looking at the dynamics, we've learned from it. And that is why we went to buy this Falcon, to ensure that instead of regular, hiring and renting, which in the end might cost us, because of course when you are renting with dollars and without exchange rate. Quite difficult to manage all these things. And so effectively, if the country has managed to purchase a Falcon, and this Falcon, per my co-panelist argument, I should be able to serve, the purpose that it is needed for. So I asked myself, what was the motivation for, renting, such an aircraft? Which is, from the submission now telling us that the difference in passengers is just about 6. What is the economic motivation for doing that? And that is why I'm telling you that there could be a dubious reasons. And the dubious for the fact that we are renting and spending 2.8 million. And somebody might be brokering the deal and saying, okay, mine could be, 1% of it, which is not a small amount anyway. So effectively, we need to understand some of these dynamics. And you see, if you do the cost-benefit analysis for having a certain, airplane, and then bypassing it to go and rent another airplane, which will add on 6 passengers, I don't think you will ensure any value for money as it is expected.
Right.
So for me, I don't see any economic sense for going to hire a plane unless you want to satisfy a certain, luxury or appetite that you look out for every now and then.
But that cannot be at the expense of the taxpayers' money.
Well, it could be, but then in the end, we have to ensure value for money. Now, if you take, the time that we went to rent this plane, I would say it was a wrong time, because we've read a budget, and in the end, the budget was more or less like an austere, budget. A budget that the intention or the signal is that it will squeeze money from the people. And the monies that are being squeezed from the people, is that how it is going to be used? Those are the questions ordinary Ghanaian will ask.
Asking, definitely.
A situation where we know COVID, has, brought down this economy. In the end, Ghanaians are beginning to understand that, okay, fine, we need to sacrifice. Because my argument, even the budget that was read for 2021, I was some way happy with it, because, sometimes over the years we have been, deferring our responsibilities into the future by more or less, not sacrificing for the country. So when the budget came and it was like, okay, let's increase tax and rates, take hard decisions and then bear the pain now. Maybe things will be soft in the future. But then what do we see? Are we going to add on so that we will not come out of this situation? I don't see, that decision to be prudent anyway.
Very well. We'll take a break at this point. When we come back, we'll go into other aspects of this issue, looking at the justification as put out by the Defense Minister and the subsequent reactions that have come. This is a Key Point. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching and listening to the Key Points live on TV3, also live on 3 FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com, also at TV3 Ghana. That's on Facebook. We're having a conversation about the Minister for Defense, who appeared in Parliament to answer a question about the President's recent working visit to France, which was done on board a private jet that was rented at a cost of 2.8 million Ghana cedis plus to the Ghanaian. And we're asking questions about that. We have Dr. Lord Mensah here in the studio, also Mr. Richard Ahiagba and Mr. Felix Ofosukwachi. We're looking at this issue. Let me come back to you, Richard. We talked about the safety issue, but perhaps I think looking at it, the means may also be perhaps an overriding issue. Yeah. So if you're looking at, do we have the means to even look at this consideration, for instance? That obviously raises the issue, which is what Dr. Lord Mensah was talking about, the economic situation and everything else. So yes, perhaps the safety is there, but the means, and during the break I was saying, people ride on all sorts of rickety vehicles, not because they are not aware about the safety conditions, but that, seriously, I can't afford any other thing. This is what I have to do. Yeah. So as a country, we're not saying, yes, the president should put himself in that dangerous position, but to the extent that this is a country of very little means in terms of, liquidity and everything, how do we even go beyond the fact that, yes, there is a presidential jet, which according to the minister is in good condition, and then go on there? Do you still think it was a good decision? Well, hearing everything around the table.
Yeah, so a good decision is subjective. You can, one thing you will agree is a good decision, another will say it's a bad decision. So really, that is not the consideration.
Financial management, I think we cannot leave that to subjectivity.
Yeah, but that's what it is. And I'm saying that it's not even the point of us agreeing is a good or a bad decision, but we must look at what really the outcomes would be for us if we make a poor decision. Because really, you can make...
Where a poor decision is put him on a more modest...
Put him on a flight that you are a bit iffy about safety. And you and I probably will agree post some, knock on wood, some misfortune happening, we'll say, well, but why didn't we think about this to do another? I'm just saying. I mean,
but
these are
necessarily mean a luxurious one.
No, I'm not even considering a luxury. I'm saying that the question of the afterthought of something happening and then you're looking in hindsight to say like we should have done something other than what we did. That is, it's a 50-50 situation with life. And we have to be circumspect once we do the analysis in hindsight to be categorical and say, no, this and that and that and that. We need to look at it. Look, we bought presidential jets in this country before, and I'm beginning to be uncomfortable about calling it a presidential jet because that's not what it is. It's exclusively, okay? So that we've bought it in this country before, and the conversations around it has always been, we don't have the money. We don't have the means, okay? But then when our presidents have to travel, they travel on airplanes. Either we rent them,
but now we have the presidential jet.
I'm coming with that. And historically, though, our presidents never traveled with numbers of people less than. Okay.
We even have to interrogate that issue as well.
Yes. Yes. And so they travel with a certain number of people. Okay. And looking at it, with Phyllis's analysis talking about what the ACJ 320 Neo would take, and then what the Falcon can take, in both situations, capacity is still a problem. Okay, if we had used the Falcon, people still would have traveled in a commercial flight. We use the rented airplane, people still traveled. So that comes to a point where you realize that capacity is limited in both ways. Now, what is the remedy? The remedy was provided for, and that's why I disagree with Phyllis in saying that, oh, we've gone past the situation where the buying of an airplane is not a concern because we have one. We don't have an aircraft that is fit for the purposes of our presidential travels that involves a certain number of people. The provisions that were made.
Can we ever have a jet that would be fit for a certain number of people?
Absolutely.
In terms of interaction? Because the
absolutely. Then, that was being...
What's the typical size of a presidential entourage? That is, I mean, and that's where we need to come to objectivity. Because when we leave things to the subjective views of people, it becomes a bit iffy.
Yeah.
Because at what point do you say, well, the entourage could be up to 10 or that 20 or that 30, and then you're now, if that's the case, if it's 20, then you're looking at a situation where you need a presidential jet that can seat up to 20. That would be absurd, totally.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that, well, I don't know, that's I'm saying we can say it's absurd, but the point is that functionally, right, is the president supposed to be enabled by people and supported by a staff?
And the only way they can do that is if they fly on a presidential jet with him?
No. But the only way they can do that is to get them to where they must be to support him.
Yes,
so it doesn't matter how they get there.
At a value for money rate.
Yeah, so I'm saying that it doesn't matter how they get there. But the point essentially is that as a country, we know we must have a means for our presidents to travel.
No two ways about that, yeah.
And so there was a provision that was made for an aircraft capable of doing that.
And
far and above the number any president will want to travel with.
So the Falcon isn't at this rate?
I mean, clearly it wasn't. And it cannot be. Felix talks about a situation where even in their times, people will have to travel on commercial flights to meet the president and do all of that. So that is an accepted way of traveling to complement.
And it's more economical.
Yes, to complement, but then you would have flown the Falcon and then have people meet the president on a commercial flight. And we're saying that in 2009 provisions, and that's why I know Phyllis doesn't want to talk about that. Okay, a provision was made to get an air flight that is capable of doing that. Fly everybody, not on a split journey where some people are flying on a commercial and some people are flying on the Falcon. But
that's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
Can we, as a people, agree that for any given foreign trip our president embarks on, there's a maximum number?
I don't think you can do that.
Exactly. So if we can't, how can we say then we're making provision for a particular type of presidential jet? All I'm trying to suggest is at any given time, the numbers could vary.
Yeah, the numbers vary, and the presidents make this decision subject to what need the travel requires, so that the number of staff that must be there, the number of officials that must be there to ensure the object of that travel is achieved. So it's never going to be just one-ton invitation of people to come, but it will be functional people who are required to be there on the flight.
Do we have the capacity in terms of finances to do those things?
Yeah. So if you allow me a second, in 2009, whilst President Kufuor was living during his last year or so in office, whilst he was leaving, made a provision for 2 flights, okay, for the Air Force. And that, the Boeing business jet, was supposed to help complement the travels of our presidents. So if you're talking about capacity in the case of Falcon, which is deficient, in the case of the ACJ 320neo, which is also deficient, then you have an option in our fleet of airlines to be able to fly them to wherever they were going to go without the need to want to rent. Now, if you had an airplane with the capacity to transport the entourage that the president was going to take to this trip, and then set aside to go and rent this one, I will be the first one to say that whether subjectivity or objectivity, I disagree with that position. Okay? So we need to be careful and have a conversation that helps us as a country to position ourselves properly for the future. We must engage in the global community. Our president must engage other people. And the need for us to get a flight or airplane or carrier that gives our presidents the capacity and the opportunity to be able to be at these places to functionally execute national requirements, I think that we need to look at it dispassionately.
Definitely.
I appreciate Phyllis's sentiment of, oh, this one and that one. But you see, when you turn the tables around, in their time, decisions were made. No, I'm just coming. No, we have not. You see, the point I am making is that if you look at it, I am willing to have an objective discussion. I hear Doc also going back and forth about economic and all of that. But there are decisions that we have made in this country. Ultimately, the motive is what matters. To the extent that we are engaged in ensuring that we are improving and making conditions better for our people, then we must engage in that. When Professor Mills talked about cancelling that BBJ or the Falcon and the BBJ order by President Kufuor, the argument was Ghana cannot afford it. But beyond that, they spent money in doing other things that we can obviously say we couldn't afford. But they did so. You understand? So the question is that with these flights, airplanes that our country needs, we must just bite the bullet and get the right thing done. Right. And I'm saying that we had opportunity and the NDC cancelled it. So today when we're having these conversations, we must be humble enough to say that going forward, let's make a sustainable decision to advance.
I believe that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, but then, so we have to take away the extreme sentiments to make a point that, oh, this is an unreasonable decision. I'm saying that to solve the problem, if we had solved it in 2009, yeah, would we be here?
Well,
I tell you categorically that we will not be here.
The Falcon came.
Yes.
There was so much, noise at the time when the decision to get that jet was, was brought up. But eventually it came. And interestingly, it didn't come. Well, it didn't come during the tenure of President Kufuor.
Of course.
It came into the
Mills's
administration. Yes, but the point is, the argument about size for me is a bit tricky because that it appears apart from the safety argument, that also becomes another argument, and the justification then is because the entourage is so huge, we would need a bigger craft, which at the end of the day will not even be able to accommodate all of the people in the entourage.
I've made that point to you.
Exactly.
I've made that point.
So that takes me into the argument or the issue about entourage and the size of it, the numbers. Isn't it long overdue for us as a country to come to a certain decision that, listen,
to cap the numbers?
Cut it.
Yeah. So we can.
And then we don't, because if we don't, you allow that space for manipulation, if you like, then we're coming up with all sorts of excuses. And Felix, you have been, thankfully, you have been in power. You've experienced,
yeah, so we can have that conversation. It's a different track of discussion we must have. I'm willing, and I think that but it's not a different, anybody, and I'm saying that it's a discussion focused on solving that problem. Exactly. To say that we have a Falcon, so going forward, no other plane should be able to carry the president apart from the Falcon. Exactly. And the numbers must be such that it is what the Falcon can carry. That's a conversation you must have, not necessarily to punch to say that, oh, you have gone to rent that one.
Yeah, because but we'll bring that in as well, because it's, so far as it pinches the citizen, because we'll definitely talk about that.
You see, I think it makes the point, and Felix also made the point earlier, about the difference between what Falcon can carry and what the Acropolis aircraft can carry. At about 4 or 3, about 4 actually. So if it's 4, the value of that 4 people or those 4 people being on the trip is inestimable. We cannot at this point estimate because they're just 4 people. Okay, can we estimate what their absence would have cost us? So that's why we need to have a clear conversation, devoid of sentiment. And I appreciate Felix's candor in having the conversation. Right. But let's understand that we need to be forward-looking about this thing and also appreciate what efforts that's been made that unfortunately was upended by the NDC administration. But going forward, let's agree that we want to do this sustainably in the future so we don't get to this situation.
So the issue about entourage, and I'm saying I'm happy because you have been there. And so that argument has been also put forward by the NDC, the NPP, and all of that. But moving forward, obviously, it's about time we took a certain decision in respect of the entourage, because you can't have everybody.
I can assure you that we don't even need to cap it. You see, governments...
We don't need to cap it.
Yeah, the point I'm making is that government's decisions must be guided by prudence. Every government should know.
But that's what we expect, but it doesn't happen.
You cannot go overboard. You cannot go beyond a certain point.
Left to that, then we won't have
laws. Let me make a point to you. You see, let us not make a fetish about presidential travel. Indeed, the requirement is that the president should have a core team around him that enables him function wherever he is.
Who defines the core team?
The core team cannot exceed 10, I'm telling you.
By what?
So I'll explain to you. Yeah. So there's the president himself. He needs his security men, so 3 or 4 of them. Then 1 or 2 aides, maybe an advisor, a doctor, and then 1 or 2 other people who may attend to his personal needs. That's all you need. And if you have that core team, they can fit into this Falcon, and there will be extra space for 1 or 2 or 3 other ministers to join you. I have been on presidential delegations before. There were a number of times that I was on the Falcon. But any time that I didn't find space, the rest of us went commercial. And I can assure you it is far cheaper than renting another jet. An alternative already exists. An alternative arrangement already exists. Which is cheaper, more affordable. That is commercial.
But perhaps we could even cut that expense out altogether if we limit the size of the entourage.
When I speak about the president's core team, that is the president's own function as a president.
Who will still have to travel via commercial means.
I'm saying that even as he travels, the personnel he needs around him to be able to function, even as he's in the air and when he lands or wherever he is, a case can be made for in terms of fitting into the presidential aircraft. All other members of the delegation, like media, you can have like 30 media men on the delegation, depending on how many broadcasters or networks are interested. Then there are ministers who, by virtue of their positions, are critical to the meeting that the president is going to attend. For example, the president is going to discuss a loan. He needs the finance minister, perhaps the attorney general, or the foreign minister, or 1 or 2 other officials. They can go commercial. Indeed, in other countries, apart from their president, their ministers also have their own jets. The U.S. foreign secretary has her own jet. So she hardly travels with the president. But I'm saying that you don't need a second jet, like Rachel was alluding to. Indeed, when we took the decision in 2009 to cancel the Boeing business jet, we thought that it was an unnecessary expense. Indeed, that jet was going to cost us an extra $65 million. It was huge. And it was an expense that we could not afford. Indeed, Doctor would remember that in 2009, we inherited a budget deficit of almost 12%, which left a gaping hole in government's finances. With a situation like that, you cannot fork out $65 million to go and buy another jet when you already have one. So my argument is that the jet we have is fit for purpose. It can handle...
We didn't have one then. We're buying the two.
We're buying 2, but we took
one.
We
didn't have one.
We took one that we believed met the requirements as I have outlined in terms of the president's personnel and what he needs.
Didn't we have the Gulfstream at the time, which was
the Gulfstream had been sold.
Okay,
the Gulfstream had been sold, but indeed it is interesting. President Kufuor refused to use the Gulfstream. He claimed that
because it wasn't safe.
No. He claimed that its purchase was shrouded in secrecy. Meanwhile, it was nothing.
The transparency issue, right?
All that happened was that we contacted the bank, HSBC. HSBC said that they will form a special purpose vehicle, which is not illegal, which is not irregular, in called Gallon, and then Gallon will buy the aircraft for Ghana, and then we'll pay back as per the agreed arrangements we have with them. That's all. There was nothing. Indeed, they set up a committee chaired by Mr. Osafo. There was Mr. J.H. Mensah. They found nothing on top. But President Kufuor refused to use it. By the time he came to power again, he had sold it off, so it was not there. Then he made a decision to buy 2 jets. We insisted in opposition that it was not necessary. Get one. When we came, we got one. This jet cost us about $40 million. The Boeing business was going to cost $65 million. We said, no, one will be enough. And we have used it. If there's any extra requirements, there are other alternatives that are far cheaper than renting this. Indeed, there are other instances. Look, I have traveled with President Mahama, where he has sat in an economy class from Frankfurt to Ghana. Economy. He didn't even sit in business class. Economy. He sat with everybody. It didn't diminish his stature as president in any way, shape, or form. It did not take anything away from him. But he sat in there. He could have made a decision to also rent an aircraft in Frankfurt, filled with luxury, and come to Ghana because he is president. But all of us sat in economic class and we got here safely.
That's the point I'm getting to, Felix, which is that if we are not hard and fast about some of these things and we leave it to the good judgment or supposedly good judgment of people, that's where the challenge will come in, because you don't know who's going to come in and what their tastes are.
Not to cut
so then at the end of the day,
the problem, presidential travels are not static in terms of numbers. Depending on where you are going, the numbers may vary. But there's a minimum standard, which is what I've explained, that the president...
But do we agree on that minimum standard?
Yeah, but I don't think that anybody would disagree.
Very well.
When the president is traveling...
It's fluid.
His communication person must be there.
Yeah.
Sometimes his chief of staff. Sometimes an advisor. His medical person must be there. His security, 3 or 4 of them. Because when you go to another country, that country is responsible for security, but you need your own protective detail. So 3 or 4 of them is sufficient.
3 or 4 of them is sufficient.
It's sufficient based on So really, there's no fetish. It's not like the president needs to travel with a whole community in order for his status.
But that's what we have. Now,
but it is completely wrong. And that is where the problem is arising.
Phyllis admitting generally to say that number cannot be static. It's contingent upon where you're going
so
and the need
any
of that
extra
travel.
outside of the president's court can go commercial, and it is far cheaper.
Right.
Yes, so that's the point. Yes,
that's what it is about.
You see, let's look at what informed the purchase of the Falcon.
Exactly.
I mean, before the purchase, the feasibility that we did as a country. I think, before that, the feasibility would have shown that at least, at the optimum, the president might need 11 people. So even if those excesses, it could be fluid as we are saying, but then in the end, if nothing at all, and in case, those numbers that we are expecting on commercial, if something should happen and they don't arrive, the president can still function at wherever he's going. And I believe the feasibility will prove that.
Exactly, with technology.
Now my question is, has the current president traveled on the Falcon before?
Yeah, he mentioned, he said yes. It's been a combination of that and then commercial.
What has changed?
He's taking it to New York before.
What has changed?
That's what the Minister for Defense was saying, that they didn't have that reach, which according to Felix, that is not necessarily the case.
It's not true.
Now, you see, prudency in governance is supposed to be what rules this country. For me, it is clear, if you give us the room, everybody would like to enjoy that extreme luxury kind of life.
Who wouldn't?
But then in the end, we should know very well that we're running a country where we understand our debt level is hitting a certain threshold, which is not normal for a typical African country. A country where your interest payment and your salary is swallowing, what you generate. It becomes a problem to take such a decision at this time. So for me, we shouldn't look at it with the political colors. We shouldn't look at it and say, this has happened, like my brother Richard is saying. I mean, this has happened in the past, and we did this and that. So therefore, what prevents, the current system for doing that? I think, the president's, inaugural speech should guide us in everything. He indicated that he's going to protect the public purse. But for me, I don't see this to be a way of protecting the public purse. From my financial eyes. Now, the timing to think about even getting, a new jet which I know the discussion will go
That
in
also,
that
yes,
direction.
yeah, you can start off with that.
It's very, very even wrong. Wrong in a sense that we don't know the post-COVID situation. Now the globe is embracing, conferences and then meetings on virtual. To the extent that during the COVID, when the world shut down, the global financial movement has been tied to sustainability now. To the extent of looking at what is happening with our climate. Now, a time is coming that sometimes a country, you may be assessed on the number of travels you do, based on the emissions.
And what comes out of it?
What will come out is that you might not attract the necessary funds, because the funds are tied to protecting the environment. So for me, post-COVID situation sometimes might not necessarily encourage several travels. It might not necessarily be. We're going to have a situation where a lot of meetings and conferences are going to be online. And if you do online and conferences are online, you're going to have incentives. And one of the incentives will be that you might easily attract green funding into your country. That is the trend we are going. That is the trend we are gravitating, the globe towards. So for me, I think we shouldn't, look at it as satisfying our, in a way, our culture, like as I indicated in my earlier submission. Now let's come to whether this purchase was captured in the budget or not. And
the proposed purchase.
Exactly. This proposed purchase was captured in the budget or not. Now, this is a major decision. I think if this was to be mentioned in the budget, coupled with the introduction of those taxes, I don't think that Ghanaians would have taken it light.
Because like you said, the budget was tilted towards austerity.
Exactly, more or less. So effectively, something that was not mentioned in the budget, I know Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior will have their own, budget expenditure allocated to them, and in the end, they will but clearly, it's not, prudent. Now, let's look at the cost-benefit analysis of having an existing Falcon, which can accommodate core members that you want to travel with. And then
which
possibly
has about 10 more years on its lifespan. Let's put it out there.
Because
it has 20
I asked
years.
of the contract, at the back when, they think will not be comfortable to travel on this, 20 years. So if it's 10 years already, we still have more extra 10 years, to go. Now, what is the net advantage, economically, the net advantage for purchasing a new, jet compared to having an existing one, and in case you should have spillover, those people can go on a commercial flight and then meet you wherever you are going. Possibly the 11 that you are traveling with should be able to take care of you until those people comes to join them. So effectively, we need to look at this analysis. Now, the new jet that is being bought is being touted as a multifunctional, proposed, kind of jet.
Do we know the capacity?
70 to 100, the minister mentioned.
Okay.
And I'm wondering at what point, because if it is multi-purpose, then I'm looking at a situation where they're saying that the Ghana Air Force will be using the same jet in case of any travel, and the president will also be using it. Now we'll be here. If we should buy that jet, the president of the day at that time might tell us that it's not luxurious enough. No. It could be that, it has been used by
the
several number of... I'm looking into the future. Because of the dynamics of human taste.
Very well.
It can change.
That's fine. Let's hear
So
Richard on that. Richard is reacting to that.
I would tell you that, look, we have to be careful the way we are going about this. Let's look at the net advantage of what we have now compared to buying a new one.
Very well. Richard, yes.
So it's very interesting, right? This conversation we're having is many years old. When the purchase of an aircraft that can do the very thing we're talking about today. Phillies helped us with a number, $65 million. The BBJ was going to cost us.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
The value has
Yes.
shot up.
Yeah, I'm saying, so yes, so even really the decision to cancel it even has cost us if we're going to buy it today.
I don't think so.
No, please.
Okay.
I mean, you're just saying
Let's
that.
make progress.
Let's allow it.
You are the finance man here.
Yeah,
if we had bought this 10 years ago and it was going to cost us 65.
Was it also
million.
70 to 100 seater?
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, no, the BBJ was going.
No. It was 30.
30.
Yeah.
So see that with the
So please.
It was a 30-seater.
Okay. So in the circumstance we're talking now, right? We'd certainly not be renting an aircraft if we had that. Okay. So what I'm saying is that the situation we're dealing with today is because there was some decision taken in the past, and the Mills administration, okay, was taken in by the conversation of lack of resources to purchase an aircraft at a time. So they caved in to the same conversation that happened to a champion who was buying his aircraft, and they said, okay, we're not going to do it. The populist position was that let's not buy, let's just buy one. And you bought a jet that cost 45 million as opposed to 65. And then that one is limited. And he admitted, Phyllis admitted, that during their time, there were spillovers that had to go commercial. The question is, can we account for how many times people had to spill over into commercial flight and then aggregate that? Hold on 1 second. And aggregate that to tell us how much we needed extra to top up and get a 30. So the position we are please. So the position,
because we don't have much time.
Right.
Yes.
So the position we must adopt is that do we need an aircraft for our president? Not really. See, that is misleading. It's not for the president.
Yeah.
It's for the Air Force.
For his travels.
For the Ghana Air Force. It is used for all sorts of things. The minister talked about some 50 million over the past 10 years that were spent in lifting military people to assignments outside this country. If you add that, right, to the 45 million we spent to buy one that is limited, you're ending up to about 95 million that we have spent because we failed to make the decision that was necessary to attend to our needs. So we need to have a conversation, not to focus on this situation where I see the sentiment because of the cost. People can say this, because I say that, but let's make a decision rationally to say, what do we need? We need an aircraft that can function at a certain rate and can carry a certain number of people that will serve our country right. And so that we move away from the sentiment of saying, oh, this is too much, this is luxury, this is that. Let's deal with the rational decision of getting an aircraft that serve our country.
Very well. I'll give you a minute too, but before that, Richard, don't you think that timing is also important? That sometimes you need to gauge the mood of the people. We're just having a fix the country campaign online and every other thing, and we are working with a budget that is squeezing the ordinary Ghanaian into. I agree. And then we throw in this kind of thing. Sometimes, don't you think it's the timing is it comes across as there's some level of insensitivity?
Well, I'm saying that I'm aware to that sentiment and I share it. But you see, when your grandfather commit the crime of not leaving a legacy, you, the children, suffer. This is what we inherited from the Mills Mahama administration.
Very well. Let me.
Now,
I think that I need to no, you come in definitely.
We are having to deal with it, and I hope that we'll deal with this sustainably here.
We don't have much time at all. Let me say that categorically. I'll give you 30 seconds to react because I want to. Yes, and
looking at where Richard was coming from, that cancelling one of those aircraft cost us, as a country. He was looking at, the cost side. But let's look at the benefit that, and the excesses and the spillovers into our economy, the savings we made at that time. If you are going to buy 65 million, worth of aircraft, and you ended up spending 45 million. Now, the 20 million in our economy, I mean, do you know what it can do? Let's look at this. The excesses, the spillovers, the social excesses. If it's number of classrooms that you built for with this 20 million,
thanks.
I mean, there's a huge benefit that goes with it. So let's look at that side.
Now, let me demystify this position that Richard has taken. We did not lose anything by rejecting the Boeing business jet in 2009. Indeed, we gained. Look, the $50 million that the defense minister mentioned is the cost of airlifting troops to go and act in theaters of conflict around the world. That cost is borne by the United Nations, not the government of Ghana. So we didn't lose anything. We didn't spend a dime. If we buy a jet that can do that, or we will simply charge the UN for using it. So we will just make money.
Yeah.
But it will cost us to maintain and buy that jet. We are not in the business of making profit off peacekeeping. Beyond what we earn. You understand the point I'm making? No, let me make the point. So he's creating the impression that Ghana.
So you don't like making money for Ghana?
Ghana has spent $50 million airlifting troops, so we've not lost $50 million. Indeed, the UN pays for it and then pays us for the efforts of our troops elsewhere. So that point.
So we lost 50 million.
We didn't lose 50 million.
If we had the jet, we would have made 50 million.
Every time the president travels, even in the Falcon, we still incur cost.
Sure.
So if people let me make the point. If you buy a Boeing business jet and people sit in it and the numbers are huge, you will still incur cost. It is actually higher than they going commercial. Indeed, if the president had gone to France, sitting in Emirates first class with everybody in his entourage, he would have incurred less cost than we did renting his jet. So the cheapest is to go commercial. And I have gone commercial many times.
You see? So we don't need an aircraft.
So we have the Falcon.
What the Falcon does is to give you some convenience in terms of
for the president and the core team that he needs. That's all. Yeah.
But in terms of cost, the cheapest option is commercial. And commercial, indeed, if you sit in first class in Emirates, the conditions there are perhaps even better than sitting in the Falcon, I can assure you. But it is much cheaper.
Right.
So let us get that straight.
Sure.
But you see, prudence is a key requirement in governance. The saying that you cut your coat according to the size of your cloth makes a lot of sense. Look, I'm sure if we get an Air Force One of the type that Joe Biden uses, we will like it. But we cannot afford it. The Emir of Qatar, he travels with 1,000 people anytime he steps out. But he can afford it. There's a country that can make $17 billion a year from gas sales. They have the money. They are entitled to spend it anyway. Exactly. There are so many things we want that we cannot get. So look, let me tell you, 3 weeks ago, I woke up at 2 a.m. to see a text message of somebody eliciting help from me because his brother had been bitten by a snake to buy antivenom. I didn't see it in time. When I woke up at 5 a.m., I got another message that the brother had died because they could not find anti-snake venom.
So the basic necessities.
Our needs are so basic, we can't meet them. So our leaders cannot live like Arabian kings.
Thank you.
They must make do with what we have.
Thank you very much.
It's fairly comfortable for the
Thank you very much. And on that note, we say a big thank you to you, Dr. Lord Mensah, Senior Lecturer with the Finance Department of the University of Ghana Business School, Mr. Richard Ahiagba, Immediate Past Executive Director of the Dankwa Institute, and Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, former Deputy Minister for Information. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And also to our viewers and listeners, we do appreciate your time. And do have yourselves a very good weekend and stay safe. We'll be back at the same time next week. Bye-bye.